Many people have tried for years, and we have so big obstacles, so big odds, that we really have to think about the whole system. And I can provide you with some very fresh information. It's only 3 weeks ago that the Philips company published their Future Health Index 2022. It's the 7th time that this index is published. It's an annual index, and it is based on a survey concerning 3,000 healthcare leaders, decision makers from 15 countries. And this is a great surprise. Number 1 on the priority list worldwide is no longer, for example, a development of remote surgery and other programs, but staff satisfaction and retention. And this means many countries. Number 4 on this list will be the US. And in the US, this term was coined human capital crisis. There are so many hospital staff who turn their back on their jobs. Now you can ask, what has this to do with digital transformation? These issues have been the topics of the recent years. And now number 1 on the charts is staff satisfaction. Why that, and what can we do in this connection? If you go more in detail, you can see the top barriers which are identified by those persons. And again, you see resistance among staff to upgrade technology. And a second one, staff's lack of knowledge about data are real obstacles against digitalization. Of course, we do have other problems as well concerning legal aspects, for example, security, data security, and so on and so on. But, just a moment, this is important. Most of all these decision makers, they think collection of data is very, very crucial in their future, but nearly half of them concern or assume that this is actually more a burden than an asset. So you are reminded to the early times of railway, when the stagecoach passengers loved at the railway passengers who should help putting the engine on the tracks again. I think this should not last too long, so that the workers, that the staff will really stay confident with this digital revolution. Now, what would normally the basis expect from digitalization? What would they hope from that? Relief from redundant work? No? Clear? Well, relief from work that can be automated, and of course an ergonomic optimization of the remaining work, so that they can concentrate on their real tasks. This reminds one, of course, to Industry 4.0, and it should be Industry 4.0 transferred to healthcare. Healthcare 4.0. But there is really a problem that this is, at that time, a castle in the air. How can we manage this? Otherwise, this will be like the Tower of Babylon in the Bible, you know. Bonnie M. at the waters of Babylon, you know. That this will be a building ruin, because there is such a big gap between those who develop systems and think everything is all right and sufficient, and those who shall use it. This list is, of course, self-understanding. Simplification of processes, acceleration of processes, increasing of the quality. That's clear. Everybody wants that. So that the efficiency of medical movements and medical tasks will be improved. And of course, not only locally, but also by obtaining big data, we can achieve medical and scientific results which cannot be achieved on other ways. For example, I do not remember your name, but Mark, as he said before, there will be an improvement of the results. There can be, but we do have problems. Now, do you know this footballer? Very famous footballer from Borussia Dortmund. He has passed away for several years, but he coined a very remarkable sentence. It's not quite plain German. Entscheidend ist auf dem Platz. Gray is all theory. What counts is the practice. And this will be the decisive point. Now, as I said, I'm an anesthetist, and I would like to tell you something how anesthesia is applied in hospitals who already have tried to put digitalization into the operating rooms. This is Mrs. Miller, covered with a blanket, awake, waiting for the anesthetist. This is the anesthesia machine, you know, and this is, of course, here, the most important person in the room, the computer. Now, the anesthetist enters the room. The first thing he does is, of course, to get to the computer. You know? He has to type in several data and his name and so on and so on. You are reminded of old Egyptian priests, which have to put sacrifices to the sun god Ra. You know, that will be the first action prior to saying hello to the staff and so on and so on. And after having done that, then he can begin to deal with the patient. Now, okay, let's say he has applied anesthesia. You see, this is a general anesthesia to Mrs. Miller. And you know, normally the patient has a critical phase here. So blood pressure can change, heart frequency can change. But what's the most important task now for the anesthetist? Giving another sacrifice to Sun God Ra. That's really reality. You have to put in new data, and this is, of course, a little bit weird, isn't it? Isn't it a threat to the quality of the process? I think everybody in the room would know what the answer to this question should be. But that's as it is today. This is reality in an operating room, in the beginning of an operation. It's teamwork. I have not shown any other people in the room on my slides before, but you have to perform teamwork. You have to think about thousands of things. But now the main person is Mr. Computer. I am your God. You shall not have other gods besides me. Perhaps you'll remember this from another holy book. Now, repeating the list which I showed you before, you can see the red items. Processes are often, in 2022, complicated, are delayed. The quality is threatened. And, of course, employees often have an additional burden, and you are remembered of the famous book by Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. Will this be the brave new IT world, digitalization world of the hospitals? Here you see what this results in. Then we have the next question. Why is this like this? Well, I'm convinced that there is a big gap between the worlds. The one world is the world of the software and hardware developers, and the other world is the world of the users. And not to forget, the users are not the decision makers normally. Philips asked the decision makers, but for example, the nurse who has to type in things in a cumbersome way. She who could tell you where the foot press is. Sorry. A special point, perhaps you know this book here, Cheaper by the Dozen. It was written by the children of Frank Bunker Gilbert in the US. He has been an engineer, and he had 12 children, so this is the book. It's a very nice to read book, and has also been filmed. But Gilbert, he was a remarkable person. He said, if somebody has to do an action repeatedly, then you have to analyze the action according to time. And this means, for example, transferred to our field, if you have to drag the mouse to a special button on the computer, and this takes, let's say, 4 seconds, then and you have to do this action, let's say, 200 times a day, then you have to think about how you could reduce this time to 2 seconds, for example. This is the name, methods, time, measurements. And the problem is, of course, you could say, okay, it's such a short time, only click on this button. But if I do not sit in front of the computer, but at the side of the patient, of course, and the monitors, I must at first identify where the cursor is. You understand what I mean? So this takes an additional, let's say, 2 or 1 second. And this is important. I do not have the hands free all the time. Maybe this is also a hygiene aspect in many, many cases. So this is also a hardware problem. I would say hardware has to be adapted to the specific tasks in the operating room. If you sit there like majestics on the shield, being bared by your subordinates, you won't get all the aspects of the normal work. And this is the result of a 2015 study, which could show that the time required for documentation tasks, and documentation is everything in the hospital, you know, is largely underestimated. Largely. And also by the bosses. Next point is the time required for a single mouse move, as I told you, is also largely underestimated. And then we have another problem. You know, we have an age problem concerning our employees, and the willingness and ability of these people is largely overestimated concerning the implementation of IT, because they have learned different things. They wanted to work in a human workplace, not in an IT workplace. And as you see, this is the famous children's movie, Thomas the Little Engine, British engine. There is really a danger that the engine does not notice that the wagons are decoupled from it and that it is alone. I've often noticed this in this field. So, if you have such an oppressive environment, it's not very credible that you will make the big deal here, is it? Now, in order to summarize this a bit, software design is somehow dilettante because it's not adapted to the specific needs of the users. Log in and log out is so cumbersome. Clicking is cumbersome. And I have learned, for example, there are hospitals who use two different hospital information systems which are not intercompatible. Phew. And of course, the question of data security is another aspect. The arrangement is unergonomic. As I showed you, why should I, as the doctor, turn my back to the patient when he is in a critical state? But I'm forced to that up to now. So what we have to do is to customize hardware and software in a much better way. What's really crucial is interoperability, as I said. Ergonomics, that's clear. We have to center on the tasks which we really have to achieve. And I think this is, of course, self-understanding. Everybody knows that this is necessary. But it is so, or it seems so difficult, really, to put this into action. Now, this is a list, let's say, list of wishes, you know, but also a list of things which are possible, which will be possible by the technologies which already have been developed. For example, data classes, there in the middle, you know. Data classes instead or additionally to monitors. So that's no longer necessary that the doctor turns his back to the patient in critical situations. Yes? Non-contact sensor technology, when the doctor has his hands not free. Gesture control, voice control, and so on and so on. And we need this whole systems. And sometimes we can use gesture control, sometimes voice control, sometimes voice control will be annoying to the other actors in the operating theater. Yes, so you need all these tools so that you have really a flexible, interactive communication. Well, okay, everything deals with the human factor. And as I said, we have to think a bit out of the box. Well, in 1911, the American, what was he? Was a manager, Frederick Taylor. He made up his concept of what is called Taylorism. You know? So everything has to be on place. Workers have to act like little robots, and planners and doers are strictly separated. This was the maxim of Taylorism, and in some circumstances this is also all right, but in many others not. And in the 80s, and I want to take you back to management theory at this point, the famous American manager Jack Welch, perhaps you have heard this name, he said, well, we have to learn from the Prussian military. Ooh, what has this to do with Prussian military? What has military to do with healthcare, for example? Well, the point is, if you have many imponderabilities, many things which you cannot predict in the course, so that your plans, you have to plan, but if you must be aware that your plans cannot be achieved right in that way as you have designed them, then you have to do other things than Taylorism. Moltke, Helmut von Moltke, the first, he designed the concept of Auftragstaktik. It's a loan word in many modern languages. And this meant that every soldier in this field, and as Jack Welch transferred it, every employee must know about the aims that have to be achieved. And he does not want that compliance is achieved by compulsion. He wants everybody to understand what's going on, what he shall do, and in case decide on himself. And then have very close feedback loops to the managers, to the bosses, and so on, so that there is a continuous improvement. And I can tell you, according to new figures, this has meant in military that in the 2 world wars, and this has nothing to do with any ideology, in the 2 world wars, the German losses in soldiers have been 1/3 compared with the losses of their opponents. And the same applies to the Israeli forces, because they adopted this concept, and adapted it, of course, as well. 1/3 of the losses. And it is said that, for example, the 6 Days War was won by the Israelis only and just because they used Auftragstaktik. So, and now I would not like to give a military speech, but I want to say there is so many parallels between military and healthcare. We have emergencies. Well, there are surprises in what we see in the stomachs and so on in the operations, so that we have to adapt this system in order to achieve really good results with digitalization. So, summarizing, instead of a muscle car rolling over the people, over the staff with its solutions, we should have another concept. Take all the employees, take all the staff with you. Use their intelligence and their findings so that you really can say, okay, the appearance may be weak, but something magical is still in store. And then we will be successful. More tailored solutions rather than tailorized solutions. Thank you for your attention.